Sir, step away from the counter for me. Need you over by the door.
Excuse me, I'm waiting on my drink.
You match the description of a suspect we're looking for. Step over here, please.
What description is that? Because I'm in a suit getting coffee.
Dark suit, medium build, 40-ish male. Need to clear this up.
Or is it just because I'm black?
Sir, it isn't about that. Step away from the counter.
I'm not going anywhere.
The Starbucks on Connecticut Avenue in Washington, D.C. was moderately busy at 7:23 a.m. on Thursday, April 13, 2023. The usual morning rush, lobbyists grabbing lattes before meetings, staffers picking up breakfast sandwiches, tourists studying maps while waiting for their orders. Nobody paid much attention to the well-dressed black man in the charcoal suit standing in line, checking his phone while waiting to order his usual grande dark roast, black, no sugar. Marcus Williams had ordered that same coffee from this same Starbucks probably 300 times in the past 4 years. The baristas knew him by name. They knew his order. They knew he worked at the FBI field office 6 blocks away. On busy mornings like this, they'd often start making his coffee the moment they saw him walk in. What Marcus didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that in the next 27 minutes, his routine coffee stop would transform into a federal incident that would cost the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department $5.6 million, result in the termination of 12 officers, send 2 people to federal prison for a combined 19 years, trigger a Justice Department investigation that would expose decades of systemic corruption, and ultimately lead to reforms so sweeping that they would become a blueprint for police departments in 17 states. The officer who was about to make the worst decision of his career, D.C. Metro Sergeant Vincent Patterson, had absolutely no idea that the man he was about to detain wasn't just another black professional in a suit. Marcus Williams was the special agent in charge of the FBI's violent crime and major offenders program for the entire Washington, D.C. field office. He supervised 87 agents. He had led investigations that resulted in the arrests of gang leaders, human traffickers, corrupt politicians, and yes, police officers who thought their badges made them untouchable. He had personally overseen 9 investigations into law enforcement corruption in the past 6 years. 6 of those investigations had resulted in federal indictments, and he was about to add a 7th. Before we go any further, I want you to drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. City, state, country, let me know. And if you believe nobody should be treated like a criminal for buying coffee, hit that subscribe button right now. This story is going to show you exactly how deep corruption can run and what happens when someone with real power decides to burn it all down. Marcus Jerome Williams was 44 years old, though people often guessed younger. He attributed it to genetics from his father's side and a disciplined fitness routine that included running 5 miles every morning before work. He had been with the FBI for 19 years, rising through the ranks faster than most agents ever managed. His path to the Bureau had been unconventional but impressive. Marcus grew up in Southeast D.C. in the Berry Farm neighborhood during the crack epidemic of the late 1980s and early 1990s. His father was a Metro Transit bus driver. His mother worked as an administrative assistant at Howard University. They weren't wealthy, but they were stable, which in that neighborhood at that time made them relatively fortunate. Marcus watched friends get pulled into gangs, saw classmates drop out of school, attended funerals for teenagers who died in drug-related violence. His parents had been relentless about education. His father worked double shifts to afford Catholic school tuition, first at St. Francis Xavier, then at Gonzaga College High School, one of the best prep schools in D.C. Marcus thrived there. He was a good student, not brilliant, but disciplined. He played football well enough to get recruited by small colleges. He graduated with a 3.6 GPA and multiple scholarship offers. He chose Georgetown University, staying close to home. He majored in criminology and government, fascinated by the intersection of law enforcement and policy. During his junior year, he did an internship with the FBI's Washington field office. That internship changed his life. He saw federal agents conducting sophisticated investigations, building complex cases, taking down criminal organizations that local police couldn't touch. He saw the power of federal resources combined with investigative expertise. He knew immediately that this was his career. After graduating from Georgetown with honors, Marcus applied to the FBI. The application process was grueling. Background checks, psychological evaluations, polygraph tests, physical fitness assessments. Marcus passed everything. He was accepted to the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia in 2004 at age 25. The Academy training was intense. 21 weeks of academics, case exercises, firearms training, defensive tactics, and physical conditioning. Marcus excelled, graduating fourth in his class of 52. He was assigned to the FBI's New York field office, working organized crime cases. For 4 years, he investigated Russian and Albanian crime syndicates operating in Brooklyn and Queens. He worked undercover on 2 operations, helped dismantle 3 criminal enterprises, and contributed to cases that resulted in 47 indictments. In 2008, Marcus was transferred back to Washington, D.C., assigned to the Violent Crime and Major Offenders Program. This unit handled gang investigations, drug trafficking organizations, violent serial offenders, and crimes of violence that crossed state lines. Marcus proved himself quickly. He led the investigation into a gang that had committed 18 murders across D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. That investigation resulted in 23 arrests and convictions ranging from 15 years to life without parole. Marcus had a particular talent for complex investigations requiring patience and detail. He could track financial records through shell companies. He could analyze phone records to map criminal networks. He could conduct surveillance for weeks to establish patterns. He was thorough, strategic, and relentless. Criminals feared him because once he started building a case, he didn't stop until everyone involved was arrested. Over 15 years in the Washington field office, Marcus had led or contributed to investigations resulting in 217 arrests. His cases had secured convictions with sentences totaling over 400 years. He had testified in federal court 43 times. Defense attorneys called him meticulous and unshakable. Judges trusted his testimony because he never overstated evidence or speculated beyond facts. Marcus had also developed expertise in an area most FBI agents avoided: investigating corrupt law enforcement. Starting in 2017, Marcus had led or supervised 9 investigations into police officers accused of criminal conduct. These weren't minor infractions. These were cases involving evidence planting, drug trafficking, protection rackets, excessive force resulting in serious injury, and civil rights violations. 3 D.C. Metro officers had been convicted in 2018 of running a protection scheme for drug dealers. Marcus built that case. 2 Prince George's County officers were convicted in 2020 of planting guns on suspects to justify shootings. Marcus supervised that investigation. A Baltimore County detective was convicted in 2022 of stealing from crime scenes and selling drugs from evidence lockup. Marcus personally conducted that undercover operation. Police unions hated Marcus Williams. They called him biased. They accused him of targeting law enforcement unfairly. Marcus didn't care. He had grown up watching police harass his neighbors. He'd seen officers conduct illegal searches. He'd witnessed brutality disguised as law enforcement. He knew that most cops were honest, but he also knew that the corrupt ones counted on good cops staying silent. Marcus wasn't silent. In 2022, Marcus had been promoted to special agent in charge of the entire violent crime and major offenders program. This made him one of the highest-ranking agents in the Washington field office. He now supervised 87 agents working cases ranging from gang violence to organized crime to public corruption. He briefed the FBI director quarterly on major cases. He testified before Congress about violent crime trends. He coordinated with Justice Department prosecutors on high-profile indictments. Marcus's career was ascendant. People who followed bureau politics expected him to be promoted to assistant director within 5 years, possibly becoming one of the highest-ranking black agents in FBI history. That Thursday morning, Marcus's schedule was particularly demanding. He had a 9 a.m. briefing with the U.S. Attorney about an upcoming RICO trial against a gang that had terrorized Southeast D.C. for 3 years. At 11 he had a meeting with Homeland Security about a joint task force targeting human trafficking. At 2 he was testifying before a Senate committee about FBI resources for combating violent crime in major cities. All of this required him to be sharp, prepared, and caffeinated. Hence, the Starbucks stop. Marcus had left his home in Chevy Chase at 6:45 a.m., driven to the FBI's Washington field office, parked in the secure garage, and walked 6 blocks to his usual Starbucks. He was wearing his standard work attire, charcoal gray suit from Brooks Brothers, white dress shirt, burgundy tie, black wingtips polished to a shine. His FBI credentials were in his suit jacket pocket. His service weapon, a Glock 22, was holstered on his right hip, concealed beneath his jacket. He looked like what he was, a federal law enforcement executive heading to a day of meetings and testimony. Marcus entered the Starbucks at 7:21 a.m. He stood in line behind 4 other customers. He checked his phone. Scrolling through emails while waiting, the line moved forward. Marcus stepped up to the counter. "Grande dark roast, black," he told the barista, a young woman named Jessica, who recognized him immediately. "Morning, Marcus. Give me just a minute. We're brewing a fresh pot." "No problem." Marcus stepped to the side to wait, still checking his phone. He was reviewing notes for his Senate testimony, making mental edits to his prepared statement. That's when Sergeant Vincent Patterson walked through the door. Patterson was a D.C. Metro Police Sergeant, 47 years old, 23 years on the force, currently assigned to the 2nd District as a patrol supervisor. He had stopped at this Starbucks during his shift because he wanted coffee and because the department had an informal arrangement with the manager, free coffee for officers in exchange for an increased police presence that supposedly deterred crime. Patterson ordered his coffee, and while waiting, he looked around the shop. His eyes landed on Marcus Williams, standing to the side, looking at his phone, wearing an expensive suit. Something about the image struck Patterson as wrong, off, suspicious. A black man in a suit in an expensive coffee shop shouldn't have been suspicious. But in Vincent Patterson's mind, shaped by 23 years of bias that had never been challenged or corrected, it was. Patterson didn't see a federal agent. He saw a potential suspect. He approached Marcus with his hand near his service weapon. "Sir, I need to see some identification, now." Marcus looked up from his phone, initially confused. He saw a D.C. Metro sergeant standing close, hand near weapon, expression hard. "I'm just buying coffee, officer. Is there a problem?" "You match the description of a suspect we're looking for. Hands out of your pockets, step away from the counter." Marcus's analytical mind processed this immediately. A suspect description, vague and meaningless, without specifics. He hadn't been doing anything remotely suspicious. He was standing in line, looking at his phone, waiting for coffee. This was a pretextual stop based on nothing but his race. Marcus had investigated dozens of cases like this. He knew exactly what was happening because he'd reviewed body camera footage and police reports documenting this exact scenario hundreds of times. "What description specifically?" "I'd like to know what reasonable suspicion you have for detaining me." Patterson's jaw tightened. Most people didn't ask questions. Most people complied immediately when confronted by police authority. The fact that this man was questioning him confirmed Patterson's suspicions. Black male, medium build, wearing dark clothing. That's you. Now show me ID or you're going downtown for obstruction. Marcus took a slow breath. The description was so vague it could match thousands of men in D.C. black male, medium build, dark clothing that described half the professional workforce in downtown Washington. It wasn't reasonable suspicion. It was racial profiling disguised as law enforcement. Marcus made a decision. He could show his FBI credentials immediately and end this, or he could let this play out just long enough to document everything before revealing who he was. He chose documentation. Officer, that description is so broad it's constitutionally meaningless. It doesn't establish reasonable suspicion for a Terry stop. What specific articulable facts make you believe I'm involved in criminal activity? Marcus was citing legal standards from memory. Terry v. Ohio, the Supreme Court case establishing when officers can conduct investigatory stops. He was speaking like a lawyer because he'd worked with federal prosecutors for 19 years. Patterson's face flushed. I don't have to explain myself to you. Show me identification right now. Am I being detained? Yes. On what legal basis? Matching a suspect description. What crime is this suspect alleged to have committed? Patterson hesitated. He hadn't actually received any suspect description. There was no call, no bulletin, no actual crime. He had made that up on the spot to justify stopping Marcus. And Marcus, with 19 years of investigative experience, recognized the hesitation for exactly what it was. There is no suspect description, is there? Marcus said quietly. You saw a black man in a nice suit and made an assumption. Have you ever been questioned by police for doing something completely normal? Type yes or no in the comments. The other customers in the Starbucks had stopped what they were doing. They were watching now. 2 people had pulled out phones and were recording. The baristas behind the counter had stopped working, looking worried. Patterson realized he was in a situation he couldn't easily escape. He had made a stop based on nothing. He had been challenged by someone who clearly understood the law. He was being recorded by multiple witnesses. He needed to either back down or commit fully to a course of action that would justify his initial stop. He chose to commit. Turn around and place your hands behind your back, Patterson said, pulling out his handcuffs. You're under arrest for obstruction of justice and failure to comply with a lawful order. Marcus stared at him. You're arresting me for questioning your legal authority to stop me? Turn around, now. Marcus made his own calculation. He could resist and risk escalation. He could show his credentials now and possibly de-escalate. Or he could comply. Let Patterson arrest a federal agent and ensure that what was about to happen to Patterson's career would be so thorough that it would send a message to every cop in D.C. who thought they could profile black professionals without consequences. Marcus chose option 3. I'm Special Agent in Charge Marcus Williams, FBI, Marcus said clearly, speaking toward the nearest phone recording the encounter. I supervise violent crime investigations in this field office. What you're doing right now is detaining a federal law enforcement officer without articulable suspicion while I'm purchasing coffee. I strongly suggest you reconsider your next move, because every decision you make from this point forward will be reviewed by the Department of Justice Office of Inspector General. He pulled out his FBI credentials and held them up, the official badge and identification card clearly displaying Federal Bureau of Investigation and Special Agent in Charge Marcus J. Williams. The Starbucks went completely silent. Patterson stared at the credentials. His face went from flushed to pale. His hand, which had been holding handcuffs, trembled slightly. You're FBI? Special Agent in Charge? I run the Violent Crime Program. I supervise 87 agents, and I've personally investigated 9 cases of police corruption in the past 6 years, resulting in multiple federal convictions and prison sentences. Marcus paused, letting that information sink in. So I'll ask you again, Sergeant. Patterson? Marcus read his nameplate. What specific articulable facts gave you reasonable suspicion to detain me? Patterson had no answer. He stood there, handcuffs in hand, staring at a federal agent he'd just tried to arrest for buying coffee. One of the Starbucks customers spoke up. I recorded the whole thing from the moment he approached you. Another customer. Me too. Got it all on video. Marcus looked at Patterson. I want your badge number, your supervisor's name, and the incident number for this stop. And I want it right now because the alternative is that I call my office, have FBI agents come here, and we handle this as a federal investigation into deprivation of rights under color of law. Patterson's voice was barely a whisper. Badge 4521. My supervisor is Lieutenant James Morrison, 2nd District. Call him now. Tell him to come here. Patterson pulled out his phone with shaking hands and made the call. Lieutenant Morrison, I need you at the Starbucks on Connecticut Avenue. We have a situation. While they waited, Marcus's coffee was ready. The barista, Jessica, handed it to him with wide eyes and whispered, That's on the house. Marcus took it and stood there, sipping his coffee, waiting for Patterson's supervisor to arrive. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had come here for coffee. He was drinking it while standing next to the officer who had tried to arrest him for the crime of buying it while black. Lieutenant James Morrison arrived 8 minutes later. He was 51 years old, a 27-year veteran, and he knew the moment he walked in and saw Marcus Williams' FBI credentials that this was a catastrophe. Special Agent Williams, Morrison said, his voice carefully controlled. I apologize for any misunderstanding. I'm sure Sergeant Patterson was just... There's no misunderstanding, Marcus cut him off. Your sergeant saw a black man buying coffee and decided I matched a suspect description that doesn't exist. When I asked for the legal basis of the stop, he threatened me with arrest. When I cited constitutional law, he pulled out handcuffs. He was about to arrest a federal law enforcement officer for obstruction because I questioned why I was being detained while ordering coffee. Morrison looked at Patterson, who had gone even paler. This will be reported to the FBI Office of Professional Responsibility, the Department of Justice Inspector General, and the D.C. Metropolitan Police Internal Affairs Division, Marcus continued. I want a full report from Sergeant Patterson documenting his basis for this stop. I want any CAD records or dispatch calls he claims to have been responding to. I want his body camera footage. And I want all of it delivered to my office by end of business today. Morrison nodded quickly. Yes, sir. You'll have everything. One more thing, Marcus said. I've been coming to this Starbucks for 4 years. Same time, same order, 3 or 4 times a week. Has Sergeant Patterson ever been assigned to patrol this area? Morrison pulled out his phone and checked assignment records. His expression confirmed Marcus's suspicion before he spoke. He's been assigned to this patrol sector for 11 months. So he's probably seen me here dozens of times. Black man in a suit, buying coffee, same routine. Never suspicious before. What was different today, Lieutenant? Morrison had no good answer. I'll tell you what was different, Marcus said. Today he decided to assert his authority. Today he saw an opportunity to stop someone he assumed wouldn't push back. Today he thought he could get away with it. Marcus finished his coffee, threw the cup away, and looked at Patterson one last time. You have no idea how badly you just screwed up. Then he walked out of the Starbucks and headed to his office, already composing the email he would send to the FBI director, the Justice Department Inspector General, and the head of D.C. Metro's Internal Affairs Division. By the time Marcus arrived at his office at 8:07 a.m., he had decided this wasn't going to be handled quietly. Too many black professionals had been stopped, questioned, detained, and arrested for doing ordinary things. Too many of those incidents had been resolved with apologies and promises to do better. Too many officers had faced no real consequences. Marcus Williams had the power to ensure this one would be different. He called his assistant. Cancel my 9:00 a.m. meeting. Reschedule the Senate testimony. Clear my morning. I'm filing a formal complaint, and I'm going to make sure it's handled correctly. Then he started making calls. Call 1. FBI Director Christopher Wray's office. Marcus had briefed the director personally on multiple occasions. he had access. Call 2, the Department of Justice Office of Inspector General, which investigates misconduct by federal law enforcement and violations of civil rights by state and local police receiving federal funds. Call 3, the Washington Post. Marcus knew a reporter who covered police accountability issues. If this was going to send a message, it needed to be public. Call 4, his attorney, a civil rights lawyer named Patricia Chen, who had won $23 million in settlements from various police departments over her career. Patricia, I need you to sue the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department. Marcus, what happened? He told her everything. When he finished, there was a long pause. They tried to arrest you for buying coffee. Yes? While you were wearing a suit and displaying no suspicious behavior whatsoever. Correct? This is going to be enormous. I know, make it count. By noon, the story had broken. The Washington Post published a detailed account based on interviews with witnesses, cell phone footage from customers, and Marcus's official statement. The headline read, FBI Supervisor Detained While Buying Coffee, Alleges Racial Profiling by D.C. Police. The cell phone videos were posted online. Within hours, they showed everything. Patterson approaching Marcus aggressively, Marcus calmly asking for legal justification, Patterson threatening arrest, Marcus revealing his FBI credentials, Patterson's shocked reaction. The videos went viral. Within 24 hours, they had been viewed 14 million times. Within 3 days, over 40 million people had watched a D.C. Metro sergeant try to arrest an FBI special agent in charge for buying coffee while black. The reaction was immediate and intense. Civil rights organizations called for Patterson's termination. The FBI Agents Association issued a statement condemning the incident. The National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives demanded a federal investigation. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser called Marcus personally to apologize. This should never have happened. We're taking this seriously. Good, Marcus said, because I'm taking it seriously too. I'm filing a federal civil rights lawsuit, and I'm requesting a full DOJ investigation into the Metropolitan Police Department's stop and search practices. The Justice Department's Civil Rights Division opened that investigation within a week. Federal investigators spent 7 months analyzing everything. They pulled data on every stop made by D.C. Metro officers over the past 5 years, 623,000 stops total. They reviewed body camera footage from thousands of encounters. They interviewed hundreds of residents about their experiences with police. What they found was systemic and damning. The DOJ's final report, released in November 2023, was 287 pages of documented constitutional violations and racial discrimination. Key findings: black residents in D.C. were stopped at rates 4.7 times higher than white residents, even after controlling for neighborhood crime rates and demographics. In affluent, predominantly white neighborhoods, black pedestrians and drivers were stopped at rates 8.2 times higher than white residents. The suspect description. Justification was used in 47% of stops involving black individuals, but only 9% of stops involving white individuals. When officers claimed someone matched a suspect description, they could produce an actual call or bulletin only 23% of the time. Officers conducted searches during 34% of stops involving black individuals, but only 11% of stops involving white individuals. Despite higher search rates, contraband was found in only 8% of searches of black individuals, compared to 29% of searches of white individuals, clear statistical evidence that black residents were being searched on weaker justification. The report identified 127 officers with statistically significant patterns of racially disparate stops that couldn't be explained by legitimate law enforcement factors. Sergeant Vincent Patterson was at the top of that list. Over his 23-year career, Patterson had made 147 stops. Of those, 1,063 were of black individuals, 92.7% of his total stops in a city that was 46% black. Patterson had claimed suspect description match as justification in 412 stops. When investigators cross-referenced those stops with actual CAD calls and bulletins, they found Patterson had a valid suspect description in only 31 cases. The other 381 stops were based on fabricated justifications. Patterson had also been the subject of 17 complaints of racial profiling over his career. Every single complaint had been marked unfounded or not sustained by D.C. Metro's Internal Affairs Division. Not one had resulted in discipline. The DOJ also discovered something else. Patterson had a documented history of making false statements in police reports. In 47 cases over 10 years, Patterson had written reports claiming suspects had been acting suspiciously or appeared nervous or made furtive movements. And body camera footage contradicted those claims in every case. Patterson had been lying in police reports for years. Nobody had caught it because nobody had bothered to review his body camera footage against his written reports until now. On December 8, 2023, 8 months after the Starbucks incident, a federal grand jury returned indictments. United States of America versus Vincent Michael Patterson, Count 1. Deprivation of rights under color of law, 18 U.S.C. Par 242. Unlawful detention of Marcus Williams, Count 2-6. Deprivation of rights under color of law. False stops and detentions of 5 other individuals. Count 711, filing false police reports. 18 U.S.C. Par 1001. Count 12, conspiracy to obstruct justice. But Patterson wasn't the only one indicted. The grand jury also charged Lieutenant James Morrison with conspiracy to obstruct justice and misprision of felony for deliberately failing to report Patterson's pattern of misconduct. They charged 2 internal affairs investigators with conspiracy to obstruct justice for dismissing valid complaints against Patterson without proper investigation. And they charged D.C. Metro's Assistant Chief of Patrol, Robert Hendricks, with conspiracy to obstruct justice for being aware of Patterson's complaint history and promoting him to sergeant anyway. 5 people indicted, all for their roles in either committing or enabling years of constitutional violations. The trial began in March 2024. Marcus testified for a full day, walking the jury through not just his own experience, but his analysis of Patterson's pattern based on the DOJ investigation. Sergeant Patterson stopped me because he saw a black man in a location where he thought I didn't belong, Marcus told the jury. It didn't matter that I was wearing a suit. It didn't matter that I was doing nothing suspicious. In his mind, black people in expensive coffee shops buying expensive coffee are inherently suspicious. And he's been operating on that assumption for 23 years, making over 1,000 stops based on race rather than reasonable suspicion. The prosecution called the 5 other victims named in the indictment. All were black professionals, a doctor, 2 lawyers, a software engineer, and a teacher. All had been stopped by Patterson for vague reasons. All had been questioned aggressively. 3 had been searched. 1 had been arrested for obstruction when he asked why he was being stopped. All of them had filed complaints. All the complaints had been dismissed. The cell phone videos from the Starbucks were played for the jury repeatedly. They watched Patterson approach Marcus with his hand on his weapon. They watched Marcus calmly cite constitutional law. They watched Patterson threaten arrest. They watched Marcus reveal his FBI credentials and Patterson's horrified reaction. Several jurors looked angry when the videos ended. The defense attempted to argue that Patterson had been doing his job in good faith, based on his training and experience. The prosecution destroyed that argument by calling a police procedures expert who testified that nothing Marcus had been doing could possibly constitute reasonable suspicion under any legitimate interpretation of Terry v. Ohio. Standing in line to buy coffee is not suspicious, the expert testified. Looking at your phone while waiting is not suspicious. Wearing a suit in a coffee shop is not suspicious. There was no legal basis for this stop, 0. The jury deliberated for 11 hours over 2 days. On March 27, 2024, they returned their verdict. Vincent Patterson, guilty on all counts. James Morrison, guilty on all counts. The two internal affairs investigators, guilty on conspiracy. Assistant Chief Robert Hendricks, guilty on conspiracy. The sentencing hearing was held on May 15, 2024. Federal Judge Catherine Morris, who had presided over the trial, had strong words for all 5 defendants. Mr. Patterson, you violated the constitutional rights of Special Agent Williams and numerous other individuals over many years. You lied in police reports, you fabricated suspect descriptions, you treated black residents as inherently suspicious simply because of their race. You betrayed your oath and corrupted the badge you wore. Judge Morris paused. The guidelines suggest 12 to 15 years, given the extensive pattern of misconduct and the abuse of authority. The sentence of this court is 14 years in federal prison. Morrison received 5 years. The internal affairs investigators each received 3 years. Assistant Chief Hendricks received 7 years for his supervisory role in enabling the pattern. Marcus's civil lawsuit settled for $5.6 million, the largest settlement in D.C. history for a single incident of police misconduct. The settlement required comprehensive reforms, complete restructuring of D.C. Metro's Internal Affairs Division with independent civilian leadership, termination of 12 officers with documented patterns of racially disparate stops, implementation of an early warning system flagging officers after 3 complaints, all stop data analyzed quarterly by Race with Public Reporting body camera, footage automatically reviewed when complaints are filed, mandatory bias training, 120 hours initial, 40 hours annual, creation of a community oversight board with subpoena power federal monitoring for 7 years, independent prosecution of police misconduct cases. Marcus donated the entire $5.6 million to organizations providing legal services to people who couldn't afford attorneys in civil rights cases. I didn't file this lawsuit for money, Marcus said at a press conference. I filed it to create change, to protect people who don't have FBI credentials and can't fight back the way I could. The fallout was extensive. D.C. Police Chief Robert Conti resigned under pressure. 3 deputy chiefs were forced to retire. The entire Internal Affairs Division was disbanded and rebuilt from scratch with civilian leadership. The D.C. Council passed emergency legislation, the Marcus Williams Police Accountability Act, requiring independent investigation of all complaints against officers and creating criminal penalties for supervisors who deliberately ignore patterns of misconduct. Vincent Patterson is currently serving his sentence at FCI Cumberland in Maryland. He'll be eligible for release in 2038. His law enforcement certification was permanently revoked. His pension was forfeited. Marcus Williams continued his work at the FBI. He was promoted to assistant director in 2025, becoming one of the highest-ranking black agents in bureau history. He now oversees violent crime programs nationwide. He still gets coffee at the same Starbucks. The manager put up a small plaque near the counter. In April 2023, FBI Special Agent in Charge Marcus Williams was unlawfully detained at this location while purchasing coffee. His courage in demanding accountability led to reforms protecting thousands. May we never forget that justice requires constant vigilance. The cell phone videos are still online, still being viewed, still being taught. Over 75 million people have watched them. They're used in FBI training, law school classes, and police academies nationwide. What's your biggest takeaway from this story? Drop it in the comments. If this showed you why accountability matters even for the most powerful among us, subscribe. We're bringing you more stories that prove change is possible. Marcus Williams had every advantage. He was FBI. He supervised major investigations. He had the knowledge, resources, and institutional power to fight back. And he still got stopped for buying coffee while black. Think about everyone without those advantages. Everyone stopped in their own neighborhoods. Everyone questioned for being in places they belong. Everyone who doesn't have FBI credentials. Marcus's case shows racial profiling affects everyone. But it also shows accountability is possible when people refuse to accept injustice. Thanks for watching. If this changed how you think about bias in policing, share it. Subscribe for more stories proving justice is possible when people demand it. Final question. Should officers with clear patterns of racial profiling face criminal charges before they violate more rights? What would real accountability look like? Let me know in the comments. See you in the next one.